Welcome back, everybody. Anthony Olan here, and I want to talk about Sonic Frontiers because as of the date that I'm recording this, Sonic Frontiers is set to release in I think 2 days. And I had a bit of a thought on whether or not this game has been set up to fail since day one. Now, I don't hide the fact that I'm not a Sonic fan at all. You know this about me, or you should know this about me by now. I do not care about Sonic the Hedgehog. I think the franchise has kind of just reached its end, and it's great that this game is doing something completely new, trying to breathe life back into this franchise that's seen failure after failure after failure. You, as a Sonic fanboy, if you're watching and you're a fanboy, cannot deny that truth. Now, I will say, and I've said this before, I think the Sonic movies, the two Sonic movies we got, were pretty damn great, especially for video game movies. So I think that's maybe where they should focus on is more of those movies, not to do like a whole MCU franchise of Sonic movies. I'll get sick of that pretty easily. But for someone who does not like Sonic the Hedgehog at all, I actually enjoyed both of those movies. Now, here's what I'm talking about with this whole Frontiers is set up to fail. And I think I talked about this before. I either talked about it in this channel or on my podcast channel, but there has been times in history where a video game will have a lot of these previews and all these different videos before the game releases, showing players all the different gameplay and different things you can do, but they're showing a bit too much gameplay, and historically those are the ones that tend to fail. Now, I have seen some videos of people who played the game for about 30 minutes or so, and they've said some good things about it. But you also have games such as when Cyberpunk released, and even when Gotham Knights was releasing, players were given copies to play the game, for a number of hours, maybe to its entirety, and they've said that the games were, mixed reviews. But overall, Cyberpunk launched to a failure. Gotham Knights launched to a failure. I don't think 30 minutes of Sonic Frontiers is enough time to say good things about it overall. I played the first part of Bayonetta 3, like the first level, and thought, this is great, pretty cool. And I didn't just stop it there. I kept going. I am still going through the game because I own it, obviously. But I am in a point of the game where I still think it's pretty good. It's still doing what it needs to do to keep me interested and engaged. I'm not giving a review on it right now because I haven't beaten the game. But all the reviews I've seen seem to be unanimous, around 8 or so out of 10. And from what I played so far, I think I played maybe 3 or so hours total max in the game right now. And it is, for the most part, in that range. So, not only is the idea of there's a bit too much being shown for Sonic that could cause worry for this game, therefore meaning like they need more hype for this game so people can buy it. So, we're going to show quite a bit more for the fans. It also releases one day before God of War Ragnarok, which is pretty much the biggest sequel release since Red Dead Redemption 2. Even if you are not a fan of God of War, which I think that would only be the case if you never owned the PlayStation in your life, or if you don't have a PS5 and you have a PS4, or you don't have any of them, you cannot deny that this is basically like the biggest sequel release since Red Dead Redemption 2. And if you remember, Last of Us 2 would have been that as well, but there was all the controversy from the leaks and Joel dying in the beginning of the game, all that other bullshit that came out of that. So it's interesting how these reviews get released in different time frames. I believe Sonic reviews, according to a friend of mine, Sonic reviews are releasing tomorrow, Monday, which is what is it, the 10th? I think not even the 10th. I don't even know what date it is. So with that in mind, is it going to be one of those situations of like we want to do we want the reviews to release a day before the game launches, so it may be too late for certain people to cancel their pre-order depending on where they pre-ordered from. Kind of like we want to make sure we get as much money as we can for this game before we prove to everyone how much of a bunch of suckers they were for buying the game. I don't understand what the process is, or I don't know the process of how these reviews get released. God of War reviews came out last week, and how often is IGN giving a game a 10 out of 10? They gave God of War Ragnarok a 10 out of 10. And there is the mindset that I've heard from people saying, like, I don't go based on reviews because those reviewers are biased and therefore I can't trust what they're saying. But that means you're going to spend your money on a game that could potentially fail and could potentially be a big pile of dog shit, and you're going to blame whoever when you should be blaming yourself, because the information is out there for you to know whether or not a product is worth your money. If you look at a review channel like someone as small as my channel or someone like Angry Joe, these channels are like one person, maybe a couple guys who might be biased in some of these reviews because they're fans of a certain thing. Now, I am a fanboy of God of War, of course I am, but it's not so much of me being biased for God of War. I haven't even played the game yet because I don't have it. But considering that these other channels are giving it 10 out of 10s, these bigger review channels like IGN and GameSpot, they're not biased for the most part. They are video game journalists who are paid to give a fair and honest review on a product. If you notice, IGN, whenever they review a racing game, all those racing game reviews are done by the same guy, which means he probably has a automotive background to be able to know what he's talking about with these racing games, especially the racing simulators when it comes down to the car's tuning, how it sounds, how they perform. If since he's the guy who's been doing all the racing game reviews for IGN, to me that says possibly, because I could be wrong, but possibly what that comes off to me as is he has an automotive background and he's a video game journalist, so therefore he's given a honest, unbiased review based on his knowledge, based on what he knows, his experience. And then you may have that one reviewer who says, "Oh, I've been a Pokemon fan for years and years, and so I've given it a 10 out of 10, right?" Or whatever. In that case, that person would be biased. But for the most part, with these major companies, they have to give a unbiased, professional review. So I think when it comes to a fanboy saying, "Oh, I'm not gonna accept the fact that Sonic is gonna be a terrible game because I'm a Sonic fan," that's just horrible in my opinion. I've had games where I've been a fan of for years, and of the franchise, and then I'll say, honestly, this recent installment of the game wasn't my all-time favorite. It wasn't that great. Me personally, I'm not a fanboy of Resident Evil or a lifelong fanboy of Resident Evil. I've never been. So by that definition of being biased, I would then review every Resident Evil game as this game sucks because it's Resident Evil and I'm not a fan of Resident Evil, so I don't care about this, I don't care about that. But no, my first Resident Evil game from beginning to end was 7. And my review, or I didn't do a review on it because it was before my channel, but my honest thoughts on Resident Evil 7 was it was one of the greatest horror experiences that I've ever had. I got scared playing the game in daylight, and I loved Resident Evil 7, and that's kind of what brought me into the franchise, especially to the point where I did play the remaster or remake or whatever of the first game, and it wasn't a brand new remake ground up. It was just a remastered graphics. So same gameplay, same classic gameplay. I had to learn how to play the game and actually look up how to beat certain puzzles because of how old school it was. But I still enjoyed it. It was still pretty horrifying for me to play. Resident Evil 2 Remake. I used to do some Twitch streams on that game. I didn't do the whole game on Twitch, but what I did on Twitch, my friends would watch it and see me, enjoy it while being scared at the same time. Resident Evil 3 Remake is where they fucked up, in my opinion, and a lot of people shared the same opinion. They cut out huge parts of the game. They made it a lot shorter. It wasn't as scary. So Resident Evil 3 Remake, the best part of that game, honestly, was getting to play as Jill. That was pretty much it. Resident Evil 4, I played it on my PS4, the remaster of the original RE4. I fucking hated that game, despite everyone loving that game when it came out, and people were clowning me because I hated Resident Evil 4. And to me, it was more of I didn't play it back on the GameCube or back on the PS2. So because I played it in last gen, not being used to how it was back in the day, I hated my experience with it. There's a lot more that I hated with it, so I didn't like it at all because I didn't play it when it came out. So maybe my opinion would have been different if I played it back on PS2, maybe. But in that case, I'm giving my reasons why I didn't like it. But I still am going to play the remake of Part 4 when that releases next year. And I'm still going to give it my all to see if it's the same thing that I'm going to hate or am I gonna like the improvements that the game makes? Who knows, right? Resident Evil Village, as the final example for this whole franchise of Resident Evil, I am struggling to play through Village again because of how horrifying it was the first time I played it. Because I played it on my PS4, I now have it on my Series X, and I have memories of how hard it was for me to get through the Village in my first playthrough, because it was just so horrifying, and it was a great experience. It's a great game. There was a couple parts in that game where I was just like, and like the fish level was kind of whack, but the dollhouse was fucking terrifying. The castle was terrifying. The factory was fucking horrifying. And so I have played other RE games, 5 and 6. We don't got to talk about those because that is kind of unanimous across the board. But that's kind of my point here. Was like, yes, maybe I am being biased about Sonic not going to be good or not going to have a good release, but I think we've seen quite enough information and videos to know this game could do a lot more than what it is doing. The levels that we see, they're either super short, like actual levels that you can go into and complete a level. They seem to be very short. Even with Sonic being able to run fast, they're very short. And when you're in the open levels, they're empty. They're empty. A lot of crazy pop-ins and frame rate issues. And I don't want to hear no bullshit about a day one patch. A day one patch is not going to fix all those problems. Look at Saints Row, the last Saints Row that we got. There were so many videos out there that was showing you people. I guess certain fans who went and bought the game were just trying to be blind to it and not acknowledging, like, you could see it in those trailers and those gameplay videos before release. All the crazy pop-ins, the lack of NPCs, the cringiness of it, and Saints Row failed, and a lot of people hated it that bought it. Gotham Knights, people, despite the whole 30 frames thing, some people didn't care about 30 frames, some people did care about 30 frames. I personally didn't really care. It was more so of putting it out there, like, hey, it's a next gen only console running at 30 frames. It's kind of bullshit for a next gen console. Okay, my brother has Gotham Knights. The little bit that I played of it, I thought what I played was a fun moment, but I don't think it's worth $70. I think it's more of a Black Friday type of game, especially if you try co-op. He hasn't tried co-op yet, but if I do get it on Black Friday for a cheaper cost, if it is on sale, yeah, co-op might be more fun to play with somebody and be able to chat. Look at Returnal. If I did a review on Returnal, being a Sony exclusive, which people at one point called me a Sony pony at a couple years ago. Returnal, I play with a friend of mine online, and while we do have a lot of fun with the game and the game looks beautiful, there are still some problems with the co-op, and I wish those would got fixed, but that's just how they want to do their co-op. So I think the co-op kind of sucks in terms of like some of the mechanics, but I'm at least giving a fair opinion, a fair take on, hey, this game looks beautiful. The story is very interesting. I want to know how the game ends. We are trying to get through it. We need more time to play it. We have a lot of fun playing the game together. Mind you, I've known this friend of mine for over 10, 15 years. So we have that dynamic, and we use it to kind of catch up on life because we live in 2 different states now. So I think Returnal was a fun experience, and especially you could get it for like $30 or so now. It's really fun, even with co-op, despite all the issues that it has. Sonic Frontiers, it has really empty levels from what we've seen so far. I doubt they're going to change it by now to have or from the last video we saw to release, I doubt they're going to change it to put much more in the levels. It's more empty than Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was very empty, and I know people say Breath of the Wild was like the greatest game of all time. It's not, okay? And I think for me, like I'm not a Zelda fan, but I loved Ocarina of Time. Never got to beat it, but I did put enough time to love that game. And then Breath of the Wild, for me, I hated the weapon system. I felt the game was very, very empty. It was a launch title for Switch, and people act like it's the second coming of Christ when it's not. And I don't really care about the sequel to that game, but the point being, they were trying to do this whole Sonic Breath of the Wild type of thing. That was the vibe people got. The Supersonic could be cool if you can use it whenever you want and fly around the levels and the maps. But if it's only used for certain scripted moments, that's kind of lame. If I'm going to collect the Chaos Emeralds, I want to be able to turn Supersonic and fly around the map. I did see that they are using... I think other characters will be in the game that you can meet. I think I could be wrong on that one. But I want to be able to see more life or more NPCs rather than just Sonic is running around empty levels fighting a robot or two. But we'll find out tomorrow when the reviews come out and see what happens. But in terms of sales, honestly, it's not on Switch. I don't think it's releasing on Switch as far as I know. If it is, I could be wrong. But if you have a PlayStation 5 or even a PS4 and you can only afford one game this month, are you really gonna buy Sonic Frontiers over God of War Ragnarok? And I know it sounds like I'm being a fanboy for God of War and I'm simping for God of War, but you got to be honest here. Sonic versus God of War. But especially considering Sonic is going to drop in price, most likely, by Black Friday in a weekend or two. So you could wait for the sale. I have a couple of friends who told me they're going to wait for a sale for God of War, but they pretty much explained to me it's mainly because of the cost of the game is $70, and that I understand that completely. I pre-ordered mine and paid it in pieces, but yeah, $70 is a lot of money. So there's your example right there. Not everyone can afford both games, and not everyone can even afford one game. But if they can afford the one game of November before Pokemon, if they have Switch, because Pokemon you at least have a couple weeks to get the money for that if you work a job that gets paid bi-weekly or whatever. But you're really gonna tell me that you're gonna buy Sonic Frontiers over God of War? Now, if you said, "Hey, I'm not gonna buy any of those two because I want to buy Pokemon," that's fine too. This is a brand new Pokemon experience, the open world Pokemon for the first time, so that's gonna be fun. And it has to be better than Sun and Moon because Sun and Moon was crap. So Pokemon has been pretty good across the board. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. But I think that with the way games are set to release, how release dates are set up, and when reviews are allowed to be released to the public, I think Sonic Frontiers has been set up to fail, given that Sega has no credibility. And I say this constantly, they couldn't even finish Bayonetta 2. They lost Bayonetta to Nintendo because they couldn't afford to make the game. So Nintendo bought it out and gave the money that Platinum needed to make Bayonetta 2 and put it on the Wii U and blah, 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 blah. So Sega is somehow still in business despite the movies, helping them move money, but Sega should just be bought up by Nintendo and keep Sonic on the Switch and make the movies as well. Especially now with the Mario movie being done with Nintendo, they could do an animated Sonic movie or keep the live action, whatever you want to do. Who cares? But I think at this point, Sega should be bought out by Nintendo and let Nintendo just run the Sonic games going forward, because at least they'll put in the effort to make Sonic good for the Sonic fans. But I don't think Sonic is gonna score 8s and 9s out of 10s, maybe a 6 or a 7. If it gets lower than a 6, I'm just gonna laugh about it. But I think Sonic is set up to fail, and hopefully people wait till they see the reviews before they spend their money on it. If you see the reviews tomorrow and you pre-ordered it from GameStop and you don't like the review scores and you trust it, and go to GameStop and get your money back, because the game will probably be on sale in a weekend or two for Black Friday anyway, and you can save a bit of money as well. But that's my long video rant about Sonic. Let me know what you guys think about Sonic Frontiers in the 24 hours that we have left for the reviews come out. More like 12 hours now, but I'll see you guys later. Ragnarok is coming, as you already know, so I'm not going to beat Bayonetta 3 by that time that happens because I work full time, and I'm still only on chapter 5, I think, right now, or 6. So we'll see what happens, and I'll see you guys on the next one.